Power Project crew, thank you for checking out today's episode. This episode is recorded on May 6th, and it is with our homie Bo Hightower. One of the dopest names, one of the best chiropractors for sure. He's the chiropractor that will like chisel down on people's like bodies with a big old hammer and stuff. He's all over YouTube, Instagram, a bunch of places like BuzzFeed and all these other like TMZ type outlets always do tons of content on him because what he does is so bizarre, but it's also who he does it on. He works on a bunch of UFC fighters, a bunch of celebrities and stuff. One of the biggest ones being John Jones. So we talked about him. We talked about Michelle Watterson. But the main reason why we're having him on again is because the last time we had him on, we did talk a lot about chiropractors and all that stuff. But towards the end, we discovered that he's actually quite political. And we also discovered that he's extremely intelligent. Definitely one of the highest IQs that we've had on this podcast. And he's not a virologist. He's not a doctor, although he's a chiropractor. So if those are some of your requirements for listening to somebody talk about the coronavirus, the lockdown, the quarantine, then I apologize. He doesn't have that. However, if you keep an open mind, what you'll find is that nobody's an expert. Paul Saladino said nobody's an expert on coronavirus, but what you'll find is that Bo is actually, he researches a lot. He knows what the hell he's talking about. He's a really smart guy, and some of the things that he brings up tons and tons of references in our, own American history. So, you can say that, he's not a doctor, but what he's saying is not untrue. He's not making stuff up. He's not making crazy claims. He's just bringing stuff up that happened in the past. He blows our minds with some of the stuff that he's able to pull from his own archives. And I think you guys are going to really, really have fun with this episode. Bo is an amazing follow on Instagram. Please find his links down in the podcast show notes, YouTube and Facebook descriptions. Give him a follow. Let him know what you guys think about this episode. Let him know that you guys heard him on our show. And ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this episode with our homie, Beau Hightower. Yeah, I remember Beau Hightower had like a bunch of content on his Instagram about crabs that kept getting censored. And then so he just like leaned right into it. I was like, what's going on here, dude? But the guy's awesome.
I guess he has fun with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be stressful.
Yep. Anyway, so what's going down today, guys?
Today we got Beau Hightower on, and we're doing double duty once again, double duty podcast. And, kicking off my day here, I got some MCT oil powder in my coffee. It's in my coffee and protein powder mixture iced coffee thing that I made. And that's the perfect keto powder. And what's kind of cool is it's a chocolate protein powder, but it's a salted caramel MCT oil powder. And so it's I don't know. It's a different kind of taste, but I like it a lot.
Awesome. I know. I need to get back into the nootropic. I ran out, so hopefully I can order up some more pretty soon here. But I will say that I will admit this. I tried a different nootropic yesterday because I just wanted to get a little extra something, and I felt nothing. I was like I was really upset. Like, not going to mention who it was or like act like I'm biased, but like, not extremely biased because I took it because I expected something to happen, and it was just like, wow, that either it doesn't work as good as I remember it, or the nootropic from Perfect Keto works so good that it just made the other one seem useless. So that nootropic it's on an HNL for sure.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. If you guys are interested, please head over to perfectketo.com/power25 at checkout. Enter promo code PowerProject for 25% off your order and free shipping. Or sorry, I don't know if they're doing free shipping anymore. I got to double check on that. But it's 25% off any order of $29 or more. And I believe it's free shipping on $99 or more. Again, I'll double check on that. But for sure, $29, you get 25% off. Well, bam.
Dope.
Yeah, let me send this out to Bo.
Gonna have Mr. Hightower on.
But yeah, so before we got started recording, Mark, you were explaining why we wanted to get Bo back on the podcast.
Hey man, anybody that smashes people with a hammer, is somebody that I want to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Bo on before, and last time we talked to him for a long time, and we talked a little bit about politics towards the end, but I don't think I realized how passionate he was about it until kind of towards the end of that podcast. And I wanted to bring him back on and allow him to voice his opinion more, but also just the times that we're in now where a lot of things are getting censored. Like a lot of people, it's just an algorithm that they put out there, but like, a lot of people's YouTube channels are being censored. It's not just like the big players. It's not the people with the millions and millions of followers. It's kind of everybody. And I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, I guess YouTube is they're allowed to do as they see fit, I would imagine, because it's a company, right? So I think that maybe sometimes we forget that. We forget that, Google and I mean, even what we search for, like what we search for is probably in the beginning, it probably wasn't really censored. You'd probably type in a search and the computer would go and fetch it for you, go look for it for you. But now I'm sure there's political ties to everything. I'm sure there's, I would just imagine that would be so, because why wouldn't it be, And so there's a lot of people that won't even use like Google anymore. There's a lot of people that like, they're trying to find their own weird search engine, but to try to find one that's down the middle, I don't know if you would be able to even come up with any of them, because the only way all of them survive and the only way we get it all provided to us is through ads. And so I don't know. But, I think Beau Hightower has a lot of interesting, has a really interesting kind of vantage point on some of this stuff. So be excited to talk to him. And then also maybe he'll share some stuff with us about our boy, Bones Jones, because it'd be cool to hear what's going on with him. I know he, got in some trouble recently. It's kind of been a reoccurring thing. And, I'm hopeful that that guy can just continue to kick ass in the ring and continue to do better outside the ring as well. Because I love watching greatness. We're watching that Jordan series, and I kind of root for history. Whenever I see, like, I hate the Patriots because I'm a Jets fan, but whenever I see the Patriots in the Super Bowl, a lot of times I am kind of pulling for them because I want to see greatness go down. I want to see something cool happen. I want to see somebody be on another level than somebody else. So anyway, we'll talk to him about all that stuff too.
Yeah, it is cool to be able to like point to something and be like, I was there for that, tell your grandkids. But yeah, in regards to like the censorship thing, people have been freaking out about YouTube blocking certain search terms and whatnot. But I mean, if you walked into a McDonald's and before the lockdown, but if you walked into a restaurant and started, yelling a bunch of weird stuff or, no shoes, no shirt, no service, like they have the right to not give you service, right? Because it's their establishment. And YouTube, I mean, I think it kind of works on the same thing. I'm not sure. Like, it does. See, so like I didn't know that, but it makes sense, right? Like if you're spouting something that they just don't like or they don't want on their platform, then yeah, they have the right to take it down. Some of our stuff has been getting a little out there in the woods, and we've noticed some things on our YouTube channel too. But
what was it? Logan? Is it Logan Paul?
Yeah, it's because the Japanese forest thing and did the suicide thing, and then the apocalypse started. Yeah,
you can't just go and do anything, right? I mean, you, even like, and it's, I think more recently they put a policy on there where you have to say whether your stuff is for kids or not for kids or something like that, right? There's some sort of agreement there, which that's fantastic. Like that's great. I mean, we don't want our kids like falling into the wrong stuff, which they're going to anyway, but any way to protect that further, I think is good, just because young kids just aren't prepared their brains aren't prepared to see all that. They're not ready to make sense of all the different crap that's out there on the internet. But, and I think that a lot of us are probably fans of censorship in some way. Like I wouldn't want to see somebody murder somebody on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be some lines drawn. I guess it would be a matter of where the lines would be drawn, right? What do they police? What do they control? And I think this brings up even a more interesting topic is like artificial intelligence. You know, like right now, it's not really the people of YouTube, it's the algorithm that they made, you know, and the algorithm that they made, I don't know enough about it, but like it probably needs to be communicated with to like work, right? Like it's a processing thing. So somebody has to like start it to have it work, right? But at some point, some of the shit's going to like think for itself. And then it's going to determine what we see and what we don't see. And, you know, if you listen to Elon Musk or you follow any of the stuff that he talks about how artificial intelligence, at some point, it would just wipe us off the face of the earth if it needed to. And it wouldn't care, right? It would just be like, well, humans are in the way of me running my processes that I'm supposed to go through, and it'll just kill you via like Terminator 2. You know, Skynet will be fully realized. So I don't know, man. There's a lot of weird shit flying around, and some of the stuff that we've seen in science fiction movies. I mean, there's no reason to like, you know, be over thinking all this stuff, but it is like some of this stuff does seem to be kind of coming to the surface. So some strange times going on out there.
Definitely strange. Yeah. Oh, here we go. My biggest worry is someone like me who's like indifferent on certain things. Like, is Trump a good president? And like, I Google it, and then all of a sudden, you know, whoever's pushing that narrative of good or bad, you know, they're like, oh, he's, you know, perfect, or he was the worst, like according to this and that. So that's where it gets a little odd. But yeah, there he is.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We got you now.
Yeah.
I'm a Zoom noob, man. I'm a Zoom noob. I just got owned.
No, you're good, man.
Oh man, I figured you'd be on the front lines of technology over there.
Yeah, I'm a dinosaur. The gray in the beard means that I'm not interested in changing any of my ways ever, including playing anything but classic Nintendo.
Yeah, that's a good thing though. I love that. You know, just the old school, just the two buttons on there, man. You just A and B.
It's like, who's got a faster thumb? Let's go.
I tried to play some of my son's games and stuff, and he's just like, you're so bad at this. I'm like, I don't know even how to move my guy. I can't figure out how to move him. Do you play video games at all?
No time, man. I wish I could relate to people more, because I know people are big into Call of Duty and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, you know, when they stopped making the NCAA game, you know, was it probably 7 or 8 years ago now, that was the only game that I would still play, and I could kind of keep up. But when you skip a generation or so of games, I even tried to buy like a Nintendo Switch when this whole, you know, pandemic went down. Like, I'm just not interested. It's boring to me. Like, and I think when you're a business owner and you realize how many other things you're supposed to do, it's hard to justify doing that kind of stuff, you know.
How has business been for you?
It's been slow. You know, we'll probably be down grow 60 to 80 grand over the last couple months.
Damn.
You know, I think everybody's kind of dealing with that. Luckily, we've been essential, so we never closed. You know, and we deal with a cash paying basis patient. So, you know, demographically, a lot of those people are healthy. They're willing to go out in the public, and really, we've been dealing with a lot of healthcare workers, man. Like, most of my patients right now are physicians, pharmacists, nurses, people that aren't scared to go out and that still have jobs.
Yeah, last we talked, you know, you were the only one smashing people with a hammer. And what I wanted to know today a little bit too is, have you taught this method and technique to other people? I'm sure, like where we left off last time, you were talking about potentially maybe teaching it to other people, the people that are accepting and willing to admit that it's worthwhile. So have you gone through any of that yet? Have you went on to kind of teach and show people how to do some of these techniques?
Oh yeah, we've got you know, we have 10 providers that work for us now. So we have 3 clinics. We opened our Las Vegas clinic in maybe November. So we're inside of Extreme Couture right there off the strip. So Dr. Carlos Camaro, he's our physical therapist from NYU, and he's now working with Extreme Couture. And then, you know, we're using that Vegas jump off point to do a lot of our influencer stuff, and then also not pay California state income tax. So we just hired another doc yesterday, Dr. Kathleen Escobar. So that'll be our 10th provider. So yeah, just keep it moving, keep growing.
Yeah, something I wanted to get into with you today is I know that you've been censored a bunch in the past. Your Instagram has been taken down, and wanted to kind of get your take on, it seems like everyone's getting censored now, saying, opposing thoughts on the coronavirus. You've seen some of my posts, and shit is really getting divided. People are getting pulled off of subways and stuff like that for not wearing masks, and kind of seems like our civil rights are being impeded on more than ever, or at least it's bringing up a lot of questions about our civil rights. So I know that you're very political in that sense, so I wanted to kind of get your take on what's going on.
Yeah, it's funny. I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody. It's like for 40,000 years, humans have been fighting for equality, fighting for equal rights. For black people to have equal rights in this country, for gay people to have equal rights in this country, for women to have equal rights in this country. So, after all these struggles and all these deaths and all these things, the first generation that's born with equal rights, like, here, take them back. We don't want it. It's like they're so willing to, give everything away for the illusion of feeling safe. And, calling the police on their neighbors and snitching on each other. It's really shocking how our own fear can start to divide us. Kind of like you, I'm the boss of my own company. I can't get fired. I can't be censored. I'm not really reliant on sponsors. So, there are no strings on me. And I feel that, most people, especially given our platforms, want to hear as raw the truth, at least what we know of the truth, as is possible. And I think what's happening now is there's a lot of confusion going on because, when we talk about evidence, there's 5 categorizations of it. So expert opinion, anecdote, those things are class 5 level of evidence. They're not the highest level. They are evidence, but they're not the highest level. So we just continue to listen to the experts. But then we hear many physicians, you've had a few of them on your show, that have differing opinions. So which physician is the expert and which one isn't? And as a general public, I think it's very confusing. And when you have these platforms that are, supposed to be platforms and not publishers, that's what gives them the immunity, right? So they're not liable for any of the content that goes on their platform. What gives them the right to censor that water cooler talk anymore? And we've seen it, over and over again. The doc from Bakersfield, they had all their posts pulled down, especially given the nature of what we don't know about, these viruses. We don't know much about in this world. Like, we still haven't figured out HIV. We still haven't figured out, influenza. They mutate often. But now we're being told with, rigorous certainty that you should wear masks. You shouldn't wear masks. Okay, well, now it's transmissible to humans. Well, now it's not. And I think that the majority of that is being stoked by the media and by social media. This is the first pandemic in the social media era. So everything is politicized in this era, right? So no matter, and it's weird what's happened over time. I obviously tend to lean pretty libertarian and anti-authoritarian, generally speaking, whether it's conservative or liberal. And a lot of my friends that are pretty far left that are fitness or entrepreneurial, at first they were like, this is stupid. I'm not going to stay home. I should be able to work. And as the party lines sort of were drawn in the sand, you saw them switch back over. And a lot of my conservative friends, maybe it's sicker or older people, at first they were scared shitless. They're like, I'm staying home. I'm not going to go out. And again, as these party lines have sort of been drawn in the sand, now they've switched over and they're like, you know what? I'm going to go to the state capitol with a gun. So the tribalism that's within our society, within social media, has really reared its head now. And we sort of live in a post-truth society. How do we know where to get our facts from? And then that also brings up another point. Did we ever know it to begin with when there was only 3 news outlets? Was it a Project Mockingbird situation? Was that information controlled by these corporations? And are we actually able to learn information on our own now because there are voices out there? People are able to, post their experiences from hospitals in New York City. Are physicians that maybe don't agree with the status quo able to voice their opinions? And like you said, they're sort of being smashed down by YouTube, by Facebook, who are now the arbiters of truth.
For those that kind of don't know what Project Mockingbird is, like myself, could you give us a quick rundown of what that is so we can understand the reference?
Is that maybe a little bit like Pleasantville?
A little bit. Well, historically, throughout the history of this country, the CIA and I don't want to get into the deep state stuff, but the powers that be have worked meticulously behind the scenes to shape society and shape the world, particularly after World War II. So there have been many, and these files have been released, and anybody who watches, Glenn Greenwald or Tim Pool or Joe Rogan sort of knows about this stuff. But the CIA has been paying salaries for people in the media. They have influenced the media outlets on how to spin stories, which is essentially propaganda. And that's why it's important that you get your news outlets from many sources, even some that might be biased on their own, like RT or Al Jazeera, because while they may seem like differing opinions on Fox News and MSNBC, what you may find is that they have a lot of similarities in that they want to get you as fearful of each other as possible so they can sell you ads. And as long as you're not focused on the main thing, it's like I was having this conversation. It's like, say I've got 10% down in my house, right? Why is it that I have to pay 100% of the property taxes, 100% of the homeowner's insurance? Nobody ever asked that question. We're too busy fighting over who gets to pee in what bathroom. So as long as the bank cartels and the corporate media can keep us at each other's throat over ridiculous things, it's easy to distract them. So yeah, Project Mockingbird was a deep state operative project that influenced the media. And, there were many, many times, look at the MK Ultra releases where our own government has gone undercover and violated people's civil rights, and it wasn't released until 50, 60 years later. We could go back to the Tuskegee experiments where people in the South were given syphilis and allowed to be sick. So when people want to give unfettered control to this government, I would implore you to look at the history of this government, that just because something is legal doesn't make it right. Slavery was legal in this country. Jim Crow laws were legal in this country. There is a distinct morality that is different than the law. And we're seeing it everywhere. We just saw it in Gallup, New Mexico. I don't know if you saw this story, where our governor used what's called the Riot Control Act to shut that city down completely. They brought the National Guard in to cut off any entrance or exit from that city. So the military with weapons, basically shutting down that city under martial law. And I would say, we have to be very careful from a legal perspective in this country because we use precedents. Roe v. Wade, we call it the law of the land, but basically what happens, it's a judicial decision that is precedent. So we're not allowed to overrule that in any jurisdiction. So now if we can use the Riot Control Act, which, one would think that the riot would actually be happening. And how would we find a riot? Well, a large group of people that are violent. So that's not what's happening here. To quarantine a city. And on the second offense, if you violate their curfew right now, it's a 4th-degree felony. So now you can be a felon for going outside your house to go get water if you don't obey their rules.
Jesus.
And so, really? People are like,
that way.
Be safe.
So, I mean, you guys aren't allowed to go to the grocery store and stuff like that, or?
So that's in Gallup. That's not in Albuquerque, but it's about 2 hours from here.
Wow.
And they're basically saying that because there's a high percentage of people with COVID at the Indian reservations, that they have to shut the city down to get a hold of it in some way, shape, or form. So they have a curfew, and like I said, they've got the state police there, they've got the National Guard there. And, again, looking at history, we're talking about the 50th anniversary of the Kent State shootings, where 12 people were shot at Kent State for protesting the Vietnam War. So the idea that we're bringing up the National Guard on the anniversary of a date where, American citizens were killed in cold blood by people, with our United States uniforms and guns on, it's really eerie to me. And if nobody says something, why wouldn't they just intrude more? And every 20 years or so, it seems like we have another war on a noun that somehow always ends up with us losing more of our rights. So 2020, we'll have a war on a virus. 2000, we had a war on terror. 1980, we had a war on drugs. And what happens with all of these things? Well, I don't know. Maybe Reagan was, bringing crack cocaine into the inner cities, influencing the community. That is a fact that has been proven. 2000, what did we get out of 2001? We got ICE. We got the Department of Homeland Security. We got TSA. We got the Patriot Act. We got Guantanamo Bay. We got the FISA courts, which is now in the news as well. And we got two, probably illegal wars that are still ongoing to this day. But, the elites, what do? They learn. So the draft, not so popular. The draft was sort of the reason why the Kent State thing happened anyway. The draft is why Muhammad Ali sat in jail, because under good consciousness, they couldn't go to another country and kill people when this country wasn't doing anything for them. So what did our government do? They said, we'll learn from this. What we'll do is we'll give people free college and we'll just recruit them and pay them. And then people won't be so outraged that it's not their brother that's getting picked to go to war. And so where does that disproportionately hit? Well, inner cities, people that don't have a way up. So we go in there and we say, hey, you want to see the world, kid? How about free school? Why don't you go over to Iraq? And then what happens? They go over there, they're traumatized, they lose a leg, they come back here, and we don't take care of them here either. So, the government overreach is very concerning to me. And I am concerned with the virus. Don't get me wrong. People are dying from it. It's a horrible thing. There's a real pandemic happening. But it's possible to carry two ideas in your head at the same time.
For people that maybe don't know, why was your Instagram taken down a few years, maybe like 2 years ago?
Oh, that was for copyright violation. So those were from like UFC videos from the fighters that I treat. In retrospect, it looks like what happened was, Zuffa was selling to Endeavor, and ESPN was going to own all that content. So what they wanted to do was basically eliminate any of those content or any of that content that's out on the internet so that they could sell all of it. And now Endeavor's in deep shit. They got $4.5 billion in debt. So the interest that they're having to pay on that right now just to even keep themselves afloat is really difficult.
I remember you posting a bunch of stuff about like crabs, and that was getting censored. Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, there was a crab video I posted where a crab like ran into a boiling pot of oil or something like that, and the post was deleted for like self-injury or suicide or something like it. It's a crab. It's not a human being. It's a crab. So my instinct, being a contrarian, it's probably why I'm in the field that I'm in, is when somebody pushes on me, I tend to push back and amplify that. So that turned into dozens and dozens of crab videos, and it's sort of like an ongoing meme on my page now. So anytime some authoritarianness happens, posting crab videos is sort of the symbol of resistance.
Nice.
What are your thoughts on the quarantine in general?
Well, obviously, if a quarantine was going to really work, at least as far as eliminating the virus, what we would need is a real quarantine. So, 2 weeks, smash it down, 14, 15 days where literally no one is allowed to leave their house, including essential work, including hospitals, because all it takes is one person to propagate the virus again. So the intent of flattening the curve, and notice that's not around much anymore, right? Which was a real concern. We didn't have any evidence, but like, in an era where we react first and the facts come second, and in an era where we are charged up to expect the worst out of each other, this was the perfect storm, per se, when we had people really dying, when we had the ability to point fingers in an election year, and it made it a political issue very quickly. And you can sort of look at some of the things that, in retrospect are coming out. So, for example, the lady that, the fish tank lady, now being investigated for homicide, right? The hydrochloroquine versus the chloroquine or whatever. It was like, oh, what do you know? I just happen to magically have malaria medication in my cabinet. And then, they managed to make it 65 years. The husband was an engineer that worked for John Deere Systems, managed to make it to retirement, never died, but at this point decides to drink fish tank cleaner for a virus that he didn't even have. So when you hear a story like that, the bell should go off in your head. You'd be like, something sounds a little fishy. It was like the Jussie Smollett, right? It's a polar vortex, 20 below zero. He goes out in the street to go get Subway at 2 a.m. in downtown Chicago. And there's these roaming bands of MAGA country people that pour bleach on it. Like,
this is MAGA country.
Like when you hear that story, you should go, something sounds a little bit fishy here. Maybe I shouldn't just run with this and point fingers. This doesn't make sense. So we're seeing this over and over and over again, where people want attention. People want to hurt their political adversaries or, whatever it is. And because we have a demand for outrage that's greater than the supply, a lot of times that ends up being fake. And I think we've seen the same thing here when it comes to news about the quarantine. It's very difficult to find out the truth. And I think everybody's sort of realizing that, everything seems to be oriented around the president or around political parties. And it's really, I guess it shouldn't be shocking, but that's sort of where we are in this time. That now even viruses have D's or R's next to them.
Have you personally been, I obviously probably have, but I'm curious what type of precautions you've been taking for yourself, not necessarily for the virus, but more so as far as like your rights are concerned. Because like myself, when I think about this whole quarantine, it seems kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, what else are we supposed to do? Like, there are people protesting at the Capitol, but I mean, you don't have enough to lead anywhere. So like, what have you been doing personally in your life, business, family, to be able, I guess, to still hold on to, I guess, some semblance of the rights that you have?
Yeah, I mean, one person isn't enough to do anything, right? If it was, and this is the sort of sad thing too, is like if people don't unify, there's no ability to make change. And if you look at some of the groups in this country that were able to do it the best, it would be African Americans and finally gay people. But you know what? Sometimes that took violent outreach. And I'm not promoting violence, but sometimes, it might take a Birmingham, it might take an LA riot, it might take a Watts riot for people to realize like something needs to happen here. And people here are quick to turn on each other instead of saying, we're a community together. We need to stick together. I think the only thing that I've been able to do is just try to shed light on some of the inconsistencies in what is happening. If Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, I don't know how states and governors can unilaterally trample over Article 1, Article 2, Article 5, Article 8. The governor of New Mexico, again, was able to take the cell phone data from people without a warrant, without a subpoena, and track where all these cars are going. I treat a lot of officers, and they're like, if we have a missing person, we have to get a warrant to be able to access somebody's ping or cell phone data if there's a missing person, much less if they're going to track the data of the entire state to see where you're going and who you're around. It's just, and then you look at, Article 8, which is excessive fines or bails. How are you going to charge somebody $1,000 or $1,500 for going outside in a global recession? How is that not excessive fine? So unfortunately, in our society, I think people have either intentionally not been educated on their rights, or they've been trying to convince that their rights don't matter. And I think one of the things that's important right now is for people to remind people, we got all the way to the 13th and 14th Amendment. That was really crucial for this country, but that doesn't mean that we're just going to throw away the first and the second and all these other abilities for us to be a free human being. And it's a scary time when it comes to that, And some of this stuff we sort of give into, right? When we sign the agreement forms on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, we prefer the convenience and we're sort of willing to give up some of those rights. So to answer your question, I don't know if I have one, but I think as long as we can try to educate other people about, how far we've come to get rights and what rights you actually do have, it shocks me still to this day when I see people get pulled over and they start making the case for the officer. And it's like, listen, they don't come to your job and do your job for you. You have this little thing called the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to make the case. Stop making the case. Shut up. Don't say anything. Say, I would like to speak to my attorney. Say, am I being detained? Knowing your rights is the first step in not having your rights violated.
What are your what goes through your mind when you see some of these I don't know if you're on Twitter and you follow the hashtag film your hospital, and people are they're filming empty hospitals, and even some quote whistleblowers like nurses and doctors saying hey, nothing's going on. And then today I didn't watch it because we started doing this, but I had seen a New York nurse crying because she's saying that they're putting people on ventilators when they don't need to be. So when it comes to not knowing who to trust, what's your take on some of these, I guess I'll say first person, news reports coming from social media?
Like I said, I think you summed it up. It's really hard to know where to trust. And, I don't pertain to be, an expert in virology or even public health. I do have a Master of Science degree in exercise science and public health. But it's not something that I study frequently. I don't claim to have.
And you may also be the smartest person we've ever had on the podcast. Because you got some crazy IQ going on over there.
He's trying to make me blush. I don't know. I think you make a really good point there. Who do you trust? It seems at least so I went before they put the police in. When this first started going down in March, I went to all three of our major hospitals because I needed to see for myself. It's very easy to take other people's word for things, but I'm one of those Missouri kind of guys. Show me, I want to see the results. So, I went to all three hospitals and they were the emptiest I've ever seen them when I was allowed to go in. Now they have police in the front, so you can't go in. But I'm treating emergency physicians and nurses, and they're being furloughed, and they don't have very many cases here. So circling back to the question that you had before, flattening the curve was sort of the point of all of this, right? We didn't want to overwhelm the hospital system. Every public health official that I've seen never said that there were going to be a decreased amount of total deaths, no matter really what we did, as long as we didn't overwhelm the hospital system, as long as we had enough hospital beds and enough ventilators. But pushing that curve out would just mean that more people will die in the fall than would have died if this thing went right off the bat. So what I'm seeing from people is they're moving the goalposts. So now that we have managed to flatten the curve in most of these areas, and we've managed to get enough ventilators in these hospitals, we managed to create enough hospital beds that aren't being used. Comfort left New York. They didn't put anybody in the Javits Center in New York. So they did flatten the curve. So we didn't overwhelm the hospital systems anywhere. So why aren't we going back to opening back up? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. In the case of New Mexico, anecdotally speaking, there are many of my patients that are making significantly more money on unemployment now than they usually do. I know in California and New York, that's not the case, because the cost of living is so high there. But $1,100 a week in New Mexico goes a long way. So those people, and I don't blame them, they have every incentive in the world to say, why would I go back to my shitty job where I make half of that? I'm scared. And people genuinely are scared. People are getting sick and dying. The question is to what extent, and like you said, do we know where was the evidence from the get-go that ventilator was the preferred treatment for, COVID-19? We still didn't even really know the mechanism of action of how the virus is killing people. To this date, we still don't exactly know. There's a lot of competing theories. Some people posit that it damages red blood cells, the heme ring, so that we're not carrying oxygen on the iron. A lot of people posit that it's damaging the epithelial tissue because of the receptors, and that's where the damage is happening. Some people posit that's the amount of fever that's getting so high that people that already have high blood pressure are having strokes. Some people are positing that the ventilators themselves are damaging the lungs. So, because people aren't allowed to go in with, another person with them, people aren't informed, again, with their rights, with their medical rights. People don't know what HIPAA means. They don't know what in or out of network means. And sometimes they feel pressured to do treatments that they maybe don't know enough about or didn't have enough time to research because they're scared. And, it goes back to education. So I don't really know, in some of these big hospitals. I know that here in New Mexico, at least, we've had a few nursing homes that people are dying. And, the Illinois Department of Public Health, they're not trying to hide this, right? In my opinion, the media is twisting. They were very clear if you heard what she said. She said, listen, if somebody goes in with a heart attack or cancer and is in hospice for that, and dies from cancer or heart attack, and they have COVID-19, we are categorizing that as a COVID-19 related death. Not a COVID-19 caused death, but when you look at CNN and they have all the big bright numbers on the right side of the screen, they're not telling people the difference between the two. They're not saying that a COVID related death is not necessarily a COVID caused death. Well, why? They need ratings, right? So I just saw we're calling the giant Asian hornet a murder hornet now. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is the fake news media. Holy shit! Like, remember Killer Bees? Like, not Wu-Tang, but remember Killer Bees? Like, weren't they supposed to come kill us all? This was the Africanized honeybee. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the hole in the ozone layer? Whatever happened to Ebola? Whatever happened to ISIS? Like, the media constantly needs something to scare us with. And so it's like, oh, people are getting used to COVID virus. Here comes the murder hornet.
We were fucking just talking about that murder hornet right before you came on. Shit's scary, though. It's pretty big. It's pretty big. Oh, God.
What's next? The genocidal yellow jacket. Jesus.
That's amazing.
Do you think there's been, that this has been a case of like poor leadership, or do you think that this is just something that we never had to really deal with on a global scale? And so, it's easy to look back and say, okay, we probably should have done this, or this. But do you think that there's some poor leadership going on from politicians?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that for the most part, all of our politicians, including the president, including the governors, have done as much as they probably could have done to mitigate the virus. Like, I don't know how much, other than completely shutting everything down, like I said, I don't know much more you could have done. Like, we have epidemics all the time. We have H1N1, we have SARS. And that's sort of the price you get for living in a global economy, We have international travel all the time. Viruses are mutating all the time. And eventually what happens is, a pandemic then becomes something that we're used to, and then we just call it a seasonal virus. So, influenza, for example, has been a pandemic over and over and over again. And it's basically always a pandemic. It jumps hemisphere to hemisphere every single year, and it mutates all the time. But we don't call it a pandemic anymore. We've just become accustomed to the amount of deaths associated with it, and so we just call it a seasonal disease, even though it does kill the elderly and kill the young, and it's a very serious thing. And it depends on where you live, too. We tend to care about rich deaths in this country and in Europe. We don't tend to care about, all the people dying from HIV in Brazil and in Africa, and the amount of people that die from malaria in the tropics that happens every single year. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with fear. You'll hear politicians and the media constantly say, hey, we're not willing to trade money for lives. And that's a damn lie, obviously. We estimate we lose 500,000 people a year just from cigarette smoking. But we sort of accept that cultural damage because we get revenue from those cigarette companies, because we want to give people autonomy in this country. There is such thing as informed consent. We don't knock the cheeseburgers out of people's hands because of the cost of the medical system from obesity. A lot of people would argue maybe you should. I would tend, again, as a civil libertarian, to say, hey, listen, you're willing to make your own decisions in this country as an adult, but you're also responsible for the consequences of your action. I think you could be 500 pounds if you want to, but I think you should probably pay for your health care because you know the consequences of those actions. If you want to smoke cigarettes, I'm even against the war on drugs. I think people, if they want to use drugs, again, I believe in informed consent. If they want to try novel medical procedures, it's not the government's job to protect people from themselves. The government's job is to educate them. We don't knock people to say, hey, I'm going to go, bungee jumping or jumping out of a plane with a parachute. Say, hey, listen, there's no benefit from that. No, you sign a piece of paper. You're aware you could die, and you're allowed to do it, no matter the cost. So I think that we're running into, a babysitting culture where we're not holding people accountable when they choose to make the wrong decisions, and instead we're trying to make those decisions for them. And I think that's sort of a problem. I think we've lost the accountability. And the other thing too, like, every generation, it's always been the young people that have been anti-establishment, anti-authority. They've been the ones sitting out for civil rights. They've been the ones, saying, I don't want to go die in another country for this country that doesn't care about me, that doesn't take care of me. In this generation, the young people seem to be the most NPC, the most robotic about it. They're like, oh, just listen to authority. I just want to stay home. And it's really shocking to me to see that shift. And it may be that, things have been so good during the course of their lifetimes that they've never seen, real war. They've never seen real human tragedy. So to them, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened to them. And to me, like, I know a lot of greatest generation people, the people that are the most vulnerable to this disease, they're like, you know what? I've seen the Great Depression. I've seen World War II. I've seen the Civil Rights Movement. I've seen the Cold War. We've had to hide under desks because nuclear weapons are coming. If this is the way God wants me to go, then that's going to be it. But I'm not going to spend the last 10 years of my life locked in my house. And then you see the young people that have never seen anything, and they're like, oh, my God, let me wear gloves. And the gloves thing, man, that is where did the gloves come from? Holy shit. Nobody ever said wear gloves. Nobody. No healthcare body, no expert, nobody. You see him at the store. The guy wears the gloves. He wipes his nose. He touches the money. He touches his cell phone, touches your groceries, doesn't change the gloves, and then goes on to the next set of groceries. Like, what is that? We have antimicrobial properties on our skin. There's billions and billions of viruses and bacteria living on your skin at all times. That's the reason why you don't mold and don't rot, is because you have an ability to fight those things off. When you're dead, you rot because fungus and bacteria starts to eat you. So when you wear, gloves, you're actually providing a greater vector to put that virus onto something else.
One thing that you were mentioning, about our younger generation, like, obviously social media is super prevalent nowadays, but I think, and I mean, I could probably safely assume that that's one of the reasons things have been directed in the way they have, because initially when, like, you were told to stay home, you then have all these people, starting with celebrities, posting the stay home pictures and with the little sticker thing, and then everybody else starts posting about that. Then there's all these memes about how dangerous the coronavirus is, and then it's just like it gets people in this mind that you need to do this if you're going to follow on socially with what everybody else is doing. So you were mentioning how, like, this is the first time we've had a pandemic in this era. And I feel like if we do have another one, social media is going to play a big part in terms of directing people in terms of what they need to do.
Yeah. And I think we saw this before when it came to, like, mass shootings and things like that. I remember when Facebook openly admitted when there was that shooting in France and you could put, like, the French flag over your picture, they were tracking that to see who was the most able to be influenced by those types of things. who was willing to reach out and virtue signal and say, hey, look, I'm a good person too. You know, I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to be out of the group. I care about people too. You know, I don't want grandma to die as well. And that's the way it's being framed, of course. Like, everything's a nuanced debate. Very few things in life are zero sum. Like I said, you can carry two ideas. So now the idea is like, either you stay home or you're going to kill your grandma. Like, you know, it's a little bit deeper and more complicated than that. And people are like, why won't you just stay home? Well, I don't know. People have busted their lives. They went to school for decades. They, you know, spent 10, 15 years building their small business so that they could leave something for their family and to retire on. And the government has unilaterally stepped in and said, you can't do that, but I can go to Walmart. I can go to Lowe's. I can go to these other big box stores. No big deal. I can continue to get my salary as a congresswoman or as a governor, but you can't go do what you want to do. Just accept this $1,200 and sit there and shut up, peasant. And I think people feel strongly against that. And yeah, of course, if Will Smith does to stay home, have you seen Will Smith's house? Have you seen Mark Bell's house? Mark Bell, when he stays home, this guy's got a gym. This guy's balling out. You know, there's a lot of people that you know, they share a room or they have 5 people in one apartment. And when you're telling them to stay home, that's not the ideal situation. You know, we're asking young people to sacrifice a lot right now. You know what I mean? Like, kids are losing their boyfriends and their girlfriends, and they can't go to senior prom. They can't graduate. They can't, you know, play the sport. Say you're 14 and you're trying to get a college scholarship. You fought tooth and nail to make varsity. And now you're the starting pitcher, and they just eliminated your season. And now if you go to a party, you know, the elderly people are yelling at you and telling you, you're so horrible. You're a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. You don't care about the elderly. And, you know, again, I'm a 2A component, but think about if you switch that argument. When young people were scared from school shootings, when young people were scared from prescription overdoses, when young people are having a suicide epidemic, they speak their voice, and what do the elderly people say? We don't really care. We're not going to listen. So now when something's affecting the elderly and they put the pressure on the young people, now the young people are supposed to drop all of their life's passions, their goals, their relationships, their friends, because they have to sacrifice now for the elderly. And you're probably going to see a backlash. And it looks like that's what's starting to happen when you look at the spring break you know, goers or the house parties in Chicago. And just, again, the consistent overreach. And then when you see, like, our quote unquote leaders are not doing what they're telling us to do. The mayor of Albuquerque was up, you know, inner tubing with his kids when he's telling everybody you're in a lockdown. You know, the mayor of Chicago was out getting haircuts, but, you know, you cannot go get a haircut. And then she's like, well, I have to be on TV. Oh, high and mighty elected official. Cool story. And you see this all the time. You know, Nancy Pelosi's eating ice cream in front of her, you know, super rich refrigerator. And what you're seeing is sort of in a way, a class warfare. And I feel like if you look at the establishment and the way things have gone, there's this continually pitting the middle class against the lower class by the elites. And I think you're seeing the same thing happen again here now. You know, Walmart's fine. You know, Lowe's is fine. You know, all these other places are fine, but it's the middle upper class, small business, mom and pop shops that are really taking the beating here. And then we funnel $1,100 to the poor people and let them put the pressure on the smaller businesses who are all going to go under, which then creates an even greater monopsony. And when you look historically at businesses, if you look at the 70s and 80s, there was always a competitor. MCI had AT&T, Pepsi had Coke, you know, Burger King had McDonald's. You know, when you look at the organizations now, tell me who Facebook's competitor is. Tell me who YouTube's competitor is. Tell me who Amazon's competitor is. I mean, they've created functional monopsonies. Who are the bank's competitors? Can you go start your own bank? I mean, technically, yes, but you don't possibly have the collateral to do that. Start another Amazon. They're like, well, you can start your own Amazon if you don't like what they're doing.
Not really, right?
Yeah. No, of course not. You know, and again, when you look at how the laws always go into place, the tax system, right? You know, most of the loopholes are written by politicians because this isn't a democracy. We vote somebody in who's supposed to go, you know, fight for us. But of course, you know, they should have the NASCAR uniforms on to show us who they're bought and sold by. And they go write the laws that help the richest people to avoid the taxes. Even Warren Buffett has said his effective tax rate is less than his secretary's. So we have this marginal tax rate that by far hurts the middle and middle upper class. And so what you're seeing is a shrinking of that middle and middle upper class. You know, the richest people are growing too, but really it's the poorest class that's growing the most. And again, it's sort of like we were talking about with the homeownership. If we keep the poor people and the middle class people at each other's throats, then they don't notice that we're pilfering money and giving it to, you know, Raytheon, and we're bailing out Amtrak and PBS. I mean, if you look through that stimulus bill, the amount of money that goes to all these big global corps is shocking. We got 1/6 with the stimulus checks of the money that went into all that stuff.
What you're saying is kind of scary in a way, because people, they may not even be able to afford the American dream, which is just a dream, and is just a way of living beyond your means. I mean, that's the American way. Like a lot of us, you end up living beyond your means. Hopefully at some point you you learn a lesson from that and you get yourself out of that. But what you're talking about with the poor growing, what could potentially happen over a period of time is that dream is completely dead, and people don't have like hope, and that could be a really ugly thing.
Yeah, and kind of like I was talking about how the elites learned their lesson, right? They learned that people didn't like the draft. So let's formulate another way to continue our for-profit wars, but have people sort of forget about it because it doesn't affect them. That's how you can allow an Iraq war to go on for 19 years or an Afghanistan war to go on for 19 years and still taking kids from America, from this day that were born after 9/11 even happened, and shipping them over there for what? You tell me why. Well, they've also learned the same thing. Look at the French Revolution. So if you take enough people are not willing to put their lives on the line unless their Maslow's are not met. If their child is going to starve, they will pick up a pitchfork or a hammer and a sickle, and they will go to the elite's neighborhoods. So what they do is they make sure to give you just enough to get by. Here's $1,200, whatever else, just enough to get by. And as long as your Maslow's are met, as long as you've got enough food to eat, as long as you've got enough Netflix to watch, you're not going to actually speak up against the gross inequality or inequity that's happening. They know that we won't come to their neighborhoods with pitchforks right now as long as I can watch my Tiger King, as long as I can get my 99-cent chicken nuggets. They keep us addicted to those sorts of things as a distraction. Yeah. Meanwhile, people are just scraping by. Nobody has any savings. A quarter of this country didn't have enough to live on from a month or two. And we intentionally make sure that people are financially illiterate. Because the truth is if you're financially illiterate, you should never be in poverty, right? That means you know how to save. That means you don't use credit. That means you know how interest works. That means you know how to apply for a mortgage. That means you know how variable credit rates go. But the point is that our education system doesn't teach us any of that intentionally. We learn all about your state's history. We learn all about dinosaurs and geology and algebra and cursive and shit you'll never use in your entire life. Who's there to teach you about how to apply for a mortgage, or how a student loan works, or what interest rates are, or how a credit card company, or what bankruptcy laws are? Who's teaching you that thing? Unless you're the type of person to go out and look for that on your own, you're going to be SOL. Same thing with how health insurance works. I was part of a task force here in New Mexico, and I wanted this money to go to the hospitals for there to be a room with movies playing so people could understand how their benefits work. So they knew what out-of-network and in-network meant. So they knew what a copay was. 87% of people don't have any healthcare literacy. So they go in to have a procedure, and they don't know what it means to be in or out of network. And then some doctor that they don't know is out of their network comes in, helps for 5 minutes, and they get a $40,000 bill because they didn't understand the difference. We're not teaching people about their rights. We're not teaching people about finances. And you can't tell me that it's an accident. We find time to teach them all about, every possible minute outlier that exists out there. We give people student loans to go study underwater basket weaving. We allow 18-year-olds to, get $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 worth of student loan debt that you can't bankrupt. I mean, what a scam is that? And who's teaching them? Like, we just condition people. You have to buy the house. You have to buy the car. You have to get this. You have to go to college. But are we telling people, is that the best investment for your future? Because why do we work, right? Like, let's think about this. Yeah, it gives us some sense of, meaning. But the truth is we're trading hours of our lives for money, which then we exchange for food, goods, services, and things like that. And people tend not to think like that. We condition kids at an early age. You go to school from 7 to 3. You just go to school and sit there. So now they're conditioned till they're 18 to do the same thing. Now it's go to work 9 to 5. You just sit there, give me your TPS report, make the copy. And then if you're a good boy, well, after 10 years of serving us, then you can go to middle management. Nobody's teaching people, hey, listen, you don't necessarily have to do that. There's a million things that you could do. You could, especially in the internet era, you could sell any widget in the world. You could do things that you want to do. And you could do them in a way that's financially viable, where you do keep those hours of your life back. Because in reality, for most people, that's what it is. Unless you're a business owner, you're trading hours of your life for credits, which our government, by the way, doesn't balance the budget at all. I think I operated under the same old premise. I'm like, oh, yeah, we can't afford universal health care. But if this whole situation has taught us anything, I don't want to hear that shit ever again. They just printed $2.5 trillion out of nowhere to give to airlines, to give to universities, to give to all these big corporations. So don't tell me you can't afford healthcare. Just tell me it's not a priority to me, because you don't care about balancing the budget anyway. You're willing to just print money and deflate the value of the currency of people's bank accounts at any given whim just to take care of your rich buddies. So when you say we can't afford healthcare, just say it's not important to us. Just say homeless people aren't important to us. Just say it's more important for us to have wars around the world. It's more important for us to give financial aid to all these countries that hate us than to take care of homeless people. Just I want our politicians to just be honest about it. Just say that out loud.
Well, I want to know about this because you were talking a lot about education, and obviously, I mean, you said you got your master's, so you've gone through the schooling system. Have you always thought this way, or is this a way that, like, this, I guess, way of thinking, is it something that, like, your parents taught you and you went through and taught yourself all these things? Because a lot of the things you're talking about, majority of it is not taught in school, especially the history aspect of things. You're extremely, I guess, you know a lot about history, which is surprising. Not that you know, but just like most people, including myself, don't know a crazy amount about history. So how did you, I guess, figure out that this is the way you need to be going about things, and this is the way you need to be thinking about things?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a curious person, and again, my spider sense goes off. If something doesn't make sense, let's dig a little deeper on it, right? So, and again, you're talking to somebody who has 7 college degrees. So if anybody's wasted money on education, it's me. It's a good question.
Some of that come from your parents or something like that, or?
My parents didn't graduate college. My parents didn't finish college. And they're actually far wealthier than I am, by the way. To show that, one doesn't always equal another, obviously.
Yeah.
I think, I was watching College Jeopardy. I like to test myself on Jeopardy sometimes. And I was watching College Jeopardy, and these brilliant kids, right? There's these categories, and they were just kicking the shit out of 16th century French literature. And the British Bill of Rights came on as a category, and they didn't hit one single one. So this is not being taught. Rights aren't being taught in the most prestigious universities. And a lot of people don't realize we tend to think of these American ideals as so unique. The truth is that the vast majority of our Bill of Rights was copied from the British Bill of Rights. Basically the only two that are significantly different are that not to quarter troops and the right to bear arms, because we just came out of an armed conflict with them. The French helped us to win. But all those other ones, cruel and unusual punishment, right to a speedy fair trial, right to not incriminate yourself, those were actually ideals that were formed in England. So we didn't come up with those as American-only ideals. We sort of copied them. So many people don't know that, but obviously they don't know the origins of where, the workers' movement in England came to fight for people's rights as well. Again, a lot of people don't realize that slavery was actually banned far before it was in America and England. That doesn't give England, a pass, because they sure profited off of slavery in Barbados and Jamaica and the United States colonies as well. They just sort of hid it away from everybody. Oh, it's not here in England, so we're good, even though we're getting all the sugar cane and, all the cotton and all these things from our colonies over there. But the history is really important to know and understand, and alternate views of history as well. So I think what we need to do is to look at when most truths come like this, right? Follow the money trail. So if somebody truly wants you to believe something, there's probably a motive somewhere along the way for that. In our country, in my opinion, when you look at the commercials from the 70s and 80s, they're very, very different. In the 70s, if you look at what was happening, right? We had a recession, there was an oil embargo, the economy wasn't in great shape. So if you watch a commercial on TV, you'll see something like, this is a great value for the family, da-da-da-da-da-da. In the 80s, it's like, holy shit, this has got 7,000 buttons on it, juiced up steroids, blah, blah, blah. This is how you buy love for your kids. So what fundamentally changed there? And again, I'm a pretty pro-capitalism guy. Credit cards. We invented a credit system. Now you could buy things that you had to save for before. Now you can have it now. But what's the consequence of that? 21% variable interest rates, 20% interest rates. So, the elites created a credit debit system that's even greater to this day. The banks invent dollars to loan to you. They don't even have the dollars that they're supposed to. If you look at the history of the currency of money, going back to agrarian society, why was there money to begin with? I mean, originally you'd be like, listen, I've got a bag of grain, you've got 2 chickens, that seems like a fair deal. We'll go ahead and make that trade. But eventually what happens is some people are smarter or better dealers or luck. A lot of wealth is from luck. Let's not act like it isn't. Happen to being in the right place at the right time. Not everybody that got money is a genius. So what happens is somebody's better than the other. And so eventually they get a whole bunch of bags of grain. They're like, shit, I can't carry all those bags of grain around. We need something that's more efficient here. Well, okay, what is a metal that doesn't rust and it's malleable, like gold or silver, I guess, or maybe copper? Well, how do we make sure that this is worth something? Well, I guess we'll stamp the king's face on it. So then we'll say one coin is worth 10 bags of grain. So now I can carry around my coin that's 10 bags of grain. Same thing happens again. Now I've got 5,000 coins. Well, A, I'm at risk of people rolling into my village and killing me for my coins. And B, it doesn't make sense to carry that many coins around. So banks. So now I get a piece of paper that says I have X amount of coins in there. And a bank says, hey, in order for us to hold your coins, I'll give you some money back, some interest back. So you used to make, 4, 5, 6% interest on a bank. If you used to have $1 million in a bank, you could live off the interest. Of course, you make 1% now, so that's not real anymore because there's no real dollars. And so eventually what happens is we move out of the bills into off of gold currency, and then we move into debit and credit. And now we just have zeros and ones, just binary code. We literally just invent debt, and now we're selling debt. If you guys watch The Big Short, it's like, how the fuck do you sell debt? It's not real. It's fake. You bunched 5 people's debt together and sold it at an interest rate. What in the fuck is that? So our financial system is just it's crazy now. So when we created credit cards, when we created mortgages and all these things, then in order to sell the most of them, then we have to convince people, like, listen, you don't need a family society anymore. In all these other countries, even if you look at old TV shows, grandma used to live with the family, right? What's the name? Family Matters or whatever else. Like, you had grandma or somebody that was there to help you raise your children. So you had a family unit, and you still see this in other parts of the world. But that's not good for banks. That's not good for realty companies. That's not good for home builders. So now what do we say? When you're 18, get your dumb ass out of the house and go pay for an apartment or buy a house. Now I've got 2 mortgages. Also, you don't want your grandma around, so let's put her in a nursing home. Now I've got to pay for that. Now I go to work and I've got to pay for childcare because grandma's not here to help me raise my child. So all these other influences are now getting paid dollars while you go to work and trade hours of your life just to swim to pay for all of these other things. Now you have 3 generations of people that are indebted to a bank. They'll never pay it off. All the interest is paid at the front. And even if they do pay their house off, nothing is really yours, because if you don't pay your property taxes, men with guns will come and take you away from the house that you own. That's the American dream.
Have you thought about getting into politics yourself ever?
I did formerly, but since I've been married, my wife said she'll divorce me if I ever do it. So I am now out of the race.
You touched on it. Well, I mean, all of that, you were just talking about it, but you were talking about how they just printed out, so much money. What are your thoughts on like this whole thing being a plot to devalue the American dollar?
Is it a plot to devalue it? I mean, I don't know about that. These things are plausible, right? They're tangible. I think it's an election year, and I think that everybody is willing to throw dollars at poor people just to give them enough to try to make themselves get votes. And they don't really care what the long-term repercussions of that are, because they won't be in office. And if you look at the way the economic system has worked, if you look at Medicare or Social Security, the idea is we just kick the can down the road. If you even look at like police or fire or whatever, like the idea of the benefit systems for a lot of these jobs, we won't pay you much on the front end. We'll give you $35,000 or whatever, but you got great benefits. Plus you'll retire after 20 years and we'll give you 80% of whatever your number was. But, as life expectancy has now moved to 79 or 80, and you start in the fire department at 20 and you retire at 40 or 45, now I've got to hire somebody else to backfill you. So now I'm paying that salary twice. And then at 60, now that salary is paid 3 times over. So all of a sudden we're broke and we can't afford this stuff. But we'll kick the can down the road. And by the time somebody has to come to pay, we'll all be dead anyway. So it's no big deal. And I think that's what you're seeing with the runaway inflation, the devaluing of the dollar. And, the dollar has continued to fall over time. And I think that our government has sort of just decided that, A, we're the world bank currency, so nobody can really touch us. B, we've got a partnership with the Sauds. So as long as the petrodollar and the world runs on oil, we're still in a really great position. And C, we've got nuclear weapons. So if anybody really wants to call us out on it, our money's not backed by gold anymore. It's backed by nuclear weapons. And I think they're willing to allow inflation, devaluation of the dollar and national debt to grow. Because obviously, like I said, we don't care about balancing anything. You know, we bring in what, $3.5–4 trillion in taxes, but we spend this time we'll spend 7 or 8 trillion, I guess. So if we're not even trying to match that number up, what are taxes really then? Why are we paying taxes? It's really just a way to keep poor people poor. If we're not actually making those budgets work, if we're just inventing money, why do we need to pay taxes anyway? What's the difference between 3 trillion in debt and 7 trillion in debt in reality? So, you know, the whole system it's wild, man. I don't know where it's going. You know, as somebody that tries to save money, and you work really hard to save money so that you have it, and we continue to devalue those dollars because, you know, when we print money, what happens? The money that you have in your pocket is now worth less. It is worrisome in a selfish way.
Why do you think your wife said she would divorce you? Just because of the time commitment? Because you're already busy.
No, it's the public scrutiny. I mean, you know, you and I already deal with it anyway, so you're on your race to 0 followers. But when you get into politics, what people want to do is, of course, dig up every horrible, you know, possibly horrible thing you've ever done.
Yeah, we don't want that to happen.
Not with me. You know, if you look at the things that these people's wives and husbands really have to go through, the conspiracy theories and the death threats, you know, for most of these people, it shows you what sycophants they really are and how big a narcissist they really are, that they're willing to put their family through these kind of trials and tribulations. You know, there's other ways to get rich that you don't have to do that. But these people are more than willing to do it. And most of the data shows that too, right? Like the vast majority of people that end up as senators or presidents are clinically narcissistic. They care more about their legacy and their legend than anything else. You know, it's the same old thing. It's like their families sort of look at it like NBA wives too. It's sort of a business agreement, right? Like, you know, if you're an NBA wife, you know what the deal is, right? Your husband's traveling city to city. You live a very nice, wealthy life, but you're sort of willing to deal with certain things. And these politicians' wives, their families, I guess, are willing to deal with the public scrutiny, people yelling at them in restaurants and death threats and things like that because, you know, they get Raytheon money or they get Lockheed Martin money or they get, you know, whoever, Planned Parenthood, pick an organization. So I guess some people are willing to trade peace for money, and I don't think I would probably be willing to do it, but, you know, again, I wouldn't put my family in that situation.
Kind of back to Nsima's question a little bit about did you self-educate yourself in a lot of these things, or are these things that you learned in getting multiple degrees?
I would say this. I took enough decent classes to make me curious about things to where I knew where to go look for information about topics. And some of it, like, there is a problem on the internet right now because people that don't have a fundamental understanding, like, for example, everybody's a virologist right now, right? Like, do they know what, DNA helicase is? Do they know what a codon is? Do they know what a gene is? Do they know, how a ribosome works? Do they know, what any of those things are? Because if you don't have a baseline fundamental understanding of the language, it would be like trying to speak Spanish but not knowing how to conjugate verbs. Like, you can memorize certain things, but you can't really understand it or master it. Some things take experience. Most things are multimodal. You need some didactic education, right? So some sort of foundation fundamental, which is where school can be helpful. It tells you where to go look, but you have to be a curious person and willing to go look for these things on your own as well. A lot of these things are intentionally hidden from us, historically speaking. And then what you have to do is you have to get some real world experience in it too, so you can test those theories yourself. It's wild when you really think about who writes the history books. I always get into this with people because when we talk about history, so we said there's a war on drugs in the 80s, a war on terror. We had a 1960 Bay of Pigs, all this stuff. We had a war on communism, 1940 war on Nazism. Going all the way back to 1900, we had a Spanish-American war. There's always an enemy, and it seems like, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but we forget 10, 20 years, we need a common enemy. But sometimes the enemy of our enemy is totally okay. So, for example, we always talk about, Nazi Germany. This is definitely getting demonetized, by the way, this whole podcast. So, we always that's a Nazi, blah, 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 swastika. But you never hear people talk about Imperial Japan. Well, why? We needed a landing base, an ally to fight against communism in Asia. But we're not really taught in school about, the rape of Nanking and all the slaughter that happened in China and how many people they were sticking babies on spigots and having decapitation contests and, slaughtering people in the Philippines. And, because we needed them to be an ally, we were able to whitewash all of that stuff. There was no, Nuremberg trial for Japan. In fact, the emperor was actually stayed in charge for a while with Douglas MacArthur taking pictures taller than him. We allowed this thing to stay in place despite all the war crimes that happened. And we're like, hey, in fact, why don't we try to make these guys a little bit cuter, and we'll introduce anime and Pikachu and Hello Kitty, and we'll totally take away the virility of this society that was a warrior society, a society that was willing to die for their cause. In fact, a society that was much more difficult to deal with than Nazi Germany, based on the fact that they believed so wholeheartedly in their cause. Nazi Germany was more like people fought because they didn't want to get shot in the back of the head. They didn't want their families to die. They were sort of unwilling participants, but that's why they surrendered so much too. Their troops would surrender. They would give up. They didn't really believe in the cause for the most part. The Japanese, they were kamikaze. They believed that the emperor was the god king. They were willing to die for their cause. There were women diving under tanks with grenades, blowing them up. And this is why we couldn't invade mainland Japan. That's why many people argue that we had to use nuclear weapons, because there was no possible way to defeat them, because every man, woman, and child was willing to die for their cause. So when you have people like that, and this is why America could never actually be invaded, right? Like everybody here has a gun. Good luck storming through LA right now. You'll see a unity against an outside force. The only way that we can be weakened is internally, when they make us fight against each other. A house divided, blah, 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 Abraham Lincoln. But it's interesting how history is sort of revamped based on what we need it to do.
You were also talking about where you get your personal information. You mentioned like news networks. A lot of people watch CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. Those are their news networks. I know you look up a lot of these things for yourself, and maybe you go deeper on the web. But like, what other sources? Because you mentioned like Al Jazeera, et cetera. What other sources could people like look at just to get maybe slightly differing viewpoints, another perspective that they probably haven't heard about at this point?
Yeah, I mean, one of my go-to guys is Rick Sanchez, not the Rick and Morty Rick Sanchez, but Rick Sanchez on RT. Just to hear a different perspective. If you want to look at legacy media in this country, if you notice, we always go really hard at Russia. Putin, but you don't really hear much about Xi. And you saw the NBA kowtowing to it too. Oh, I don't know about anything over there. You're talking about a country that literally has concentration camps, a country that has social scoring systems, a country that had one-child policy, a brutal regime over there, because we like our cheap shit, so it's okay. They're implanting scientists and stealing information in our universities. But people are unwilling to criticize China. But we're like, oh, look at Russia. Here comes Russia again. So when you see the finger being pointed at a particular group, maybe you should hear their perspective as well. So that happens a lot in the Middle East. People are like, that's not really happening over here. And then come to find out years later, there were false flag events. Like in Syria, for example, the father of the child that a big child during the Civil War where he was covered in dirt and blood, the father of that has come out and said that they set that picture up.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So, what do, the media knows what sells, right? If it bleeds, it leads. What grabs attention? What grabs controversy? Children dying, racism, murder, anything that invokes fear within people. And like we said, like, look at hole in the ozone layer. That's going to kill us all, right? Like Y2K is coming up. Here comes, what's another? SARS, Ebola, 2012, killer bees, murder hornets. There's always something to make us fearful to tune in and watch. That way they can sell us ads. I never thought in my life that, I would actually trust Fox News more than, other news stations. But I'm sort of there. I feel like Tucker Carlson does tell the truth sometimes on some of this stuff. I literally can't trust anything that CNN does anymore, because they've gone so far in the tank with their war against the president that everything has a slant. I remember thinking during Barack Obama's presidency, I'm like, what is Fox going to talk about when he's not there anymore, right? And it's like, wow, we took the legacy media and flipped it on its head and went the opposite direction. And because the president has gone so hard against the media, even news networks that we thought were maybe down the center are exposing themselves left and right. CBS, ABC, and we can check things now on the internet. It was like they were telling us about the Kurds in Syria, and they literally used a clip from a Kentucky gun range that you could see the clip online, and they edited the bottom out so you can't see the camera phones, and they willingly posted that to say that Kurds were being slaughtered in this video. They did it a few weeks ago. They said it was a New York hospital, and it was clearly a hospital in Italy, and they were more than willing to publish that story. So at what point do we say, listen, I can't trust anything you motherfuckers are saying anymore? And maybe, and the truth is maybe we never could. We just assumed they used to tell us the truth in the past because we couldn't fact check it, because we couldn't verify it, right? We were like, hey, the big three or the big four, we just trust them, ABC, NBC, But the truth historically is they were probably lying to us more then, because there was no accountability. People are better behaved now than they ever have been before because of cell phones, because of cameras. Like, you hear the stories about JFK and all the, sex parties and everything else like that. Donald Trump can't sneeze without somebody leaking the information to the media. So in reality, like, people are much better behaved now than they ever were in the past because things were able to be hid. Now with that comes, trickery. Like, what's a real news source and how biased is biased enough to trust? And I think if you can kind of take things with a grain of salt and realize there might be some underlying truth, like, that helps. And you have to realize what the extreme, networks are and what their agendas are. Like, I love Jimmy Dore, but, I know where he stands on certain things, and things are going to slant that direction. I think some of the best people out there are the Glenn Greenwalds of the world, people that are willing to cross lines and willing to discuss things that might go against their own belief systems. I would say Tim Pool falls in that category as well.
Yeah.
Where they're not so beholden to their group, their tribe, that they're willing to buck that status quo if something is true or isn't true. And I don't think you can say that about any of the news networks, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, any of those things, PBS anymore. And that's just sort of where we're at as a society. Like, you can't watch that without watching the opposite and hearing the exact opposite story. And when you've seen that enough times, then like, listen, I can't listen to either of these independently. There's his story, her story, and somewhere in between, which is where the truth probably is.
With everything being shut down, I know the UFC has shut down as well, but it looks like they're going to start maybe having some fights again coming up. How are some of your fighters doing, and how are some of the people at Jackson Wink?
Well, Jackson's has been closed for 8 weeks now, so it's been tricky for some of these guys because, like, they're independent contractors. They don't make salary. They're not getting money right now. So Michelle Watterson is fighting this weekend. So you interviewed Michelle when you were here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So guys, make sure to go watch that video. He had an awesome interview with Michelle Watterson. It is on the channel here. She's been training at her house. She's brought folks in. She does have a little gym over there. But yeah, with the gyms closed, there's no ability to have like full training camps. So it's going to be interesting to see how people's conditioning is holding up. But this card looks sick on Saturday. I'm really excited to see some live sports again, man. We lost March Madness. We lost the NBA, season. I wonder if we're going to get NFL. And these are a big part of Americana, man. This is sort of what you do. You bust your ass all week, and you're like, all right, let me kick back and watch some basketball or some football. And you have your team, and I think that hurts more than we thought it did, or we never really thought that it could be taken away. But here we are. So I give a lot of respect to Dana for like pushing forward with it. I know he catches a lot of flack, from it, but in a sport where there's only two individuals going at it, it's one of the safer ones, despite what a lot of doctors and immunologists who are sort of virtue signaling are saying. So Saturday there's Ferguson and Gaethje, which is a crazy good fight. Ngannou and Rosenstruck, that's a crazy fight. Cruz and Cejudo should be a really interesting one. Cejudo's been out, Cejudo's got both belts. Cruz is the greatest bantamweight of all time. He's been out 3 or 4 years. And then we've got a Pettis Cowboy rematch, so that'll be fireworks. So it'll be really cool, man. Michelle had a couple of little dings here and there, but them pushing it out actually helped us and let her heal some more. So she looks really good. She's fighting Carla Esparza, and we're excited to see how she does.
How's our boy Bones?
Bones, he's good right now. He had a little run in a month ago, but he's good right now. He's learning from his mistakes. Doing a lot of archery and stuff like that. So I think he's just waiting on news for when when he's going to fight again. I'm thinking maybe July or August.
Any idea who he would fight?
I don't. I think the leading candidates right now are Dom Reyes or rematch. That was a really close fight. You know, a lot of people scored for Reyes. Of course, I didn't. Jan Blachowicz is a Polish fighter. He's knocked out a bunch of guys. That could be one that's on the table. They haven't ruled out a move to heavyweight. You know, he was wanting to fight Stipe. Stipe doesn't look like he's looking to fight anytime soon. So if Dana gets really mad with Stipe, it wouldn't shock me to see a Bones DC at heavyweight. That could be a possibility. Or, you know, if they, you know, so like I said, Endeavor's in big financial trouble. They need these UFC events to go on to pay off their interest. So they may need more super fights coming up. So, you know, if they're in a financial pickle, maybe we'll see this. We might see a Stylebender versus Jones fight, you know, if they feel like they need to make money fast. So I would say that's the least likely of the group, but, you know, it's not off the table necessarily.
Who do you have in the Hafthor Bjornsson Eddie Hall fight?
Boy, I don't know, man. I don't know their history or background in striking, or I think Martins would probably take both of them out. You know, he's the more agile of the group, and I think he has a wrestling background too. If I remember correctly. I mean, when you watch big guys fight, it's always interesting. I don't know if you guys know this, but Mariusz Pudzianowski's had like a pretty good MMA career. Like he's got a lot of power. Now he's built a little differently. He's was a lot more athletic. So in WSM competitions, you know, all the carry stuff, he was like a beast on as well, where a lot of those guys make their money on, you know, some of the overhead stuff and the deadlift stuff. So, I don't know. There's a big size difference, you know, Hafthor has a big reach advantage. You know, what's their cardio going to look like? Is this boxing? Is it left way? Is it MMA? I'm assuming it's boxing. So I don't know. I'll watch though. Why not? I watched Monica Lewinsky or whoever. No, it was Tanya Harding fight.
Are you getting a chance to watch? You watching The Last Dance?
Okay, take my money. Yeah, man. Amazing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Done.
Pretty awesome to watch. You know, Jordan. I'm always fascinated by the best of the best. So, like, what's something, you know, you're around some world champions like all the time, and at Jackson Wink, I mean, you're around some of the best coaches. You're around some of the best people. But Bones is arguably, you know, the greatest fighter of all time. Like, what is, and everyone's aware of his. You know, different situations outside the ring as well. But and maybe even some of those things are part of what makes him great. What makes him, like, what's just when you observe him and when you've been around him, what's something where you're just like, okay, that's different. And I think that's like connected to him kicking everybody's ass all the time.
Yeah, I would say what you're seeing out of The Last Dance is something similar to John. The killer mentality that Jordan had, the ultra competitiveness, you can just see it. You know, the only other guy in the NBA that I would even say that had something similar was Kobe, and there's a lot of replication between the two, right? Not really loved by teammates, had a lot of enemies, not close with a lot of people, because that type of person can't be close with. I think Tiger Woods had the same mentality. They wanted to win at all costs, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to do so. That was the most important thing. And I think that's why you see the difference in clutch time between a LeBron and a Jordan. You know, LeBron is a good guy. He's a good teammate. He passed the ball. He's a lot more like a Magic Johnson or somebody like that. It's a lovable guy. Like don't get me wrong. He's a killer too, but it's a different level of killer. They don't mind hurting people. They said that in The Last Dance, Jordan wanted to put his foot on your throat and take you out. You know, there isn't a ton of guys in a lot of sports like that. And I was trying to think the other day, like, who in what sport is like that? Tiger Woods for sure. Jordan, Kobe. I think John falls into that category too. He does not lose. He does not like to lose. He doesn't mind hurting you. And he's willing to do whatever is necessary to win. He knows it's not a buddy sport, you know, but, you know, these guys can turn it on. And I wonder too, you know, with Jordan was like our first run at a global superstar. Everybody was a Bulls fan in the 90s. As you see some of the dirt that comes out in this interview, if there was the internet, if there was social media at that time, would he have been such a hero to people if they knew about the gambling stuff, if they knew he was drinking in the locker room? Do we think that he wouldn't have been ostracized more? I'm not sure. You know, because Charles Barkley was the bad guy for some reason because he said I'm not a role model. I don't know why.
Yeah, if you remember, like when we were growing up, what they later said about Jordan, like right around the time he was going to retire the second time, is they did talk about how they felt that the press in Chicago kept a tight lid on stuff, and they wouldn't talk about stuff. I mean, obviously, I don't think they were like hiding like anything crazy. Otherwise, it probably would have came out. But I think it made a lot of sense. I mean, with the allegations of all the gambling, and then his father's passing, and there was a lot of stuff swirling around at the time. But you're 100% correct if there was social media and just all the media, because now it's media 24/7. Coming from anywhere, you know. But one thing that I thought was interesting, though, was Jordan almost did have his own reality show before there was a reality show, because there were so many cameras on him. He almost was like, social media before social media, just because there was either a still camera on him or a video camera on him all the time. And this is footage that they want to share. So there may have been times when he wasn't feeling good. Or there may have been times where he was rude or whatever. But like, you just see him every time. Just he's always dressed appropriately. He always looks great. He's always on point. He always looks awake. He always looks attentive. And then he's like with kids and fans and stuff. He's always really gracious with his time. So it's amazing. I don't know how he was able to ever keep up that pace. It was ridiculous.
Well, I think, in the ESPN era, I think a lot of the early 90s and late 80s was the white suburban first introduction to a lot of black culture. And I think the powers that be wanted to really filter out what kind of black culture they wanted to allow in. So certain people were considered dangerous or threats, and they were ostracized in that way. And then certain people were clean cut, allowed to do this, spoke articulately enough. I think there was a clip that Barack was talking about. He's like, when you come through and you break through, there's a certain expectation of the way that you're supposed to talk. And if you don't fit that, you may not make it through. So Oprah Winfrey make it through, Barack Obama make it through, Michael Jordan make it through. But if you're Dennis Rodman, or if you're Charles Barkley, or if you're Terrell Owens, and if you don't act the way you're supposed to, if you're not a good boy, if you're not Emmitt Smith, if you're not Jerry Rice and wearing a suit and saying all the right things, you're going to be ostracized. And it's interesting, different sports deal with that in different ways. Basketball is interesting because in basketball, and I think this has to do with the fans too, they don't like to see a white boy do that well. That's why the Duke guys were always the enemies, the Leitners, and they don't want to see somebody that looks like them be able to do it, a 6-foot skinny white kid be able to do it, right? So then they hate that person. Nobody thinks that they look like LeBron or Jordan, and they're not 6'7", black, flying through the roof. So they sort of accept that. So there's some give and takes, I think, racially that go on in these different sports. So from the superstar status, like you said, you have to be clean cut, shaved, blah, 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 don't have crazy facial hair. And so Jordan was the first super universal one that was smart enough to know that. And he even quotes it in the thing. He's like, Republicans buy shoes too. I'm not about to take a stand. A lot of people hated on him for that, but there's a balance, and I don't fault him for doing that. At the end of the day, loyalty and standing up for your cause doesn't pay your bills either. So while I respect people like Muhammad Ali and people like that are willing to take a stand, I don't disrespect a Jordan for saying, listen, I need to take care of what I need to take care of. And I don't need to make a statement about something I'm not an expert on.
Well, it's kind of similar to like what's been happening. You kind of mentioned it with the Houston Rockets in China, and then LeBron in China too. I think LeBron is an activist here in the U.S., but then when he started having comments on what China was doing, he's like, we need to stay out of that. But like everyone realized, do you know what's going on there? Like, how can you have a stand for stuff here, but then you're just passing that by? So. Well,
that's sort of like the Dunning-Kruger, right? That's just the passing knowledge, like looking like an expert. In life, we can only really be great at 2 or 3 things, and we kind of suck shit at everything else, right? We have a specialized society. So I don't expect an athlete to be a political science expert, but what we do expect from people is some level of consistency. So if you're going to call out an atrocity over here, we expect you to not stand up for an atrocity over here. And I think when you don't do that, then people look at you more suspect and they don't trust you as much. People want consistency. People want real. And that's why, like in fighting, people like Diaz and Masvidal and people like that, they don't want to feel like that person is a different person when the lights go on or off.
Yeah.
Nate Diaz has got to be one of my favorites just because the way the way he always speaks his mind. I saw him at a 49ers game, And I was just like, it's rare for me to be all that excited, about seeing like a superstar, or there's a lot of 49ers around and stuff, and it's cool. But I don't want to like bug people and be the weird fan. I couldn't help myself when I saw Nate Diaz there. I was just like, holy shit. But when I said hi to him, he just was same old guy that you see on. He's like, "What's up, dog?" I was like, "How you doing?" He's like, "Just having a good time." I'm like, "Me too." I didn't want to like bug him for a picture or whatever. But I was totally fanboying out.
Nice.
All right, man. Well, thanks for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, where can people find you, brother?
Just follow my name, Beau Hightower. You catch me on YouTube. What other social medias? MySpace, Friendster,
nice,
Instagram, all those things.
Ooh. And you have a couple clinics, right?
Yes, sir. We got 2 in Albuquerque. Go to lead-osm.com to book. Go see my boy Carlos in Vegas. He's at Extreme Couture. I'll get you fixed up. You got another question, Nsima?
I'm just curious because we've been asking a lot of people this. What are your thoughts on everyone's thinking about the corona vaccine as the savior? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that looking at the mutation rate, and again, I'm no expert in virology, the way that it's mutating, there's a likelihood, I think, and as fast as and as viral as it is, that a vaccine will probably look a lot more like the flu vaccine. That it won't be universal. It won't be something like MMR, that will have seasonal shots. In some years, they'll work better than others. But again, time will tell.
Cool.
This looks amazing with you driving.
Yeah.
Good luck, everybody else.
Hey, awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Take care, guys.
Talk to you later.
I was like, weird. Oh no,
that was so weird. Yeah, I didn't understand what was happening first. I was like, oh, his camera's moving. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, no, wait, maybe he's driving.
Yeah.
I was starting to get a little seasick. I'm like, oh man, my eyes are really bad. Like, oh my gosh. That was fun.
I'm happy he got off though at that point, because I know there's going to be someone who's like, you shouldn't be podcasting and driving or some shit like that. So I was like, ooh, good thing he left at that point. Man.
I forget what he's told me before, and I don't even know if I would remember what's a good score or whatever. But the guy's got some ridiculous IQ. Anybody that even knows their IQ is probably pretty smart, because why would you go and get tested? It's almost like knowing your body fat. Like there's, it would be rare for someone to be like, yeah, I got tested, I'm 33%. It's probably like if someone got tested, they're probably, I would imagine, at least under 20, under 20% if it's a guy, But anyway, he's just crazy, crazy smart. And when I said he's one of the more intelligent people we've ever had on the show, that'd be an interesting thing to try to figure out, who is, we got Ron Penna and Joel Green, and we've had a lot of really smart people on this podcast. But you guys saw, that motherfucker, that's my vote to put on Jeopardy. You know what I mean? He is, he knows a lot of stuff, and maybe it's just a good, Stan Efferding's actually, insanely smart too. It's just that we always talk to him about lifting pretty much, but you could talk to Stan about just about anything, and he's way smarter than people might anticipate. Yeah,
what Bo has on all of them though is he'll know current event stuff, and then he'll be first to a bunch of new memes and stuff in social media. He just knows a lot about everything. It's just man,
Bo knows.
Yeah, Bo knows exactly. And then even when he said that he didn't have time for video games, I've seen some pretty fringe stuff posted on his Instagram, and I'm just like, oh shit, I thought for sure he was a gamer, but but damn, that's crazy. So I was gonna say IQ, body fat, and credit score. If you don't know them, there's a good chance that they're not really high or low.
It's a good chance they're not very good, right?
Yeah, there you go.
His idea on education, though, really, it makes you really think, because, when you think about when I learned about history in school, you learned about a lot of stuff that you look back oh, that might have not actually been true. It's just, it's really weird. The education system's really weird from K through 12.
Also, why not teach people about finances, financial literacy, as he was saying. And I think there's things that, and I'm sure some schools touch upon it here and there, but the financial literacy thing, I think, is massive. I don't think schools should even really continue onward without some education of that. I also think that schools should utilize a lot of stoicism as well, and they should. I mean, I think that. I just think it makes sense. I think every person in the world should know who Marcus Aurelius is. I think there's just too many good things to learn and too many good things to know from someone like that. It's kind of a mystery on why certain things aren't taught in school. And I think that if we continue to hold on to our traditions, hey, why do we teach that? Oh, because we always have. It's like, I don't think that's a great idea anymore. I mean, even talking about dinosaurs, while that's really fun, and especially for like young kids to talk about, how much do we need to know? How much do we need to really talk about? There was these prehistoric animals that once lived here, and they have bones that are in the earth, and blah blah blah. Right, and you kind of can move on to the next topic or thing, but. Do we need to know like all the presidents? Do we need to know all the different laws? I think knowing the history of where things came from, I think, is really important. As he was kind of, talking about, kind of following a paper trail of like, of money over the years, what it's been backed by, and those kinds of, that makes a lot of sense, because then when we get into trouble in the future, when we have future problems, then we can say, oh, these problems have existed before. Remember when we had this problem, it was linked to that, and you can kind of connect the dots and you can make sense moving forward. But yeah, I really hope that things change, in the future with some of what's going on in our education system, because it just doesn't seem very good.
Yeah, kids love dinosaurs, though.
Absolutely, I love dinosaurs.
Yeah, it just seems like, with the education system, it was, me and Nsima were talking about this on our way up to Bodega. Like the whole system was put together to not to make doctors and lawyers and scientists. It was just made to put more workers on the assembly line. So it's almost like they're picking and choosing what they want to teach you from history. They're picking and choosing what you need to learn, what's going to help you just enough. And again, that's my take on it. I don't know, again, that's coming from somebody who didn't appreciate school. So obviously I'm very biased towards that direction, but it's kind of hard to argue when, like Bo's saying, how come they don't teach you like what happens when you do take out a college loan? Like I didn't know that you couldn't.
I wish I knew.
Yeah, see, I didn't know that you couldn't file for bankruptcy and it'll disappear like it does everything else. Like, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
The way that he talked about credit makes it sound so foolish. Credit, a credit card is just convenience. And it just sounds dumb. Like you didn't earn the right to have that convenience. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that's the way that you should look at it. And if you do have a credit card, which is most people do, if you do have a credit card, then you should kind of really value that convenience. Just to say, do I really need this convenience at the moment? Is this really helpful to me? Because it could be, because you could use a credit card and have it be very helpful to you, of course. But I think that people aren't thinking in those terms. But imagine if we were doing it with money and not with quote unquote credit, how foolish it would be. Like, Andrew, give me $100 now, and you can get this from me, but in 2 months you got to give me $200. Mm-hmm. you got to pay me more than the actual value of the item or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah, paying for convenience, because there's hey, like why do you drive a Tesla when you can just drive a Civic or something? It's like, well, I am paying for the convenience. It is nice. So that's when people's minds are like, yeah, well, I'm just going to pay interest to get it now so I can enjoy it now, take advantage of it right now, and then over time I will pay it. I did the same thing with camera equipment. That shit paid off, but that was a little bit different. However, there's also been times where I've bought shit that I didn't need and couldn't afford and paid the price for it later. But that's stuff that I had to learn. Unfortunately, people sometimes they don't really learn. Yeah,
it's something that it's a painful thing to learn, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And it plagues a lot of people, but again, you know, it's kind of built into, as Bo was pointing out, like this kind of idea of the American dream. A lot of people live beyond their means, and then a lot of people also wonder why they're stressed out so much and have so much anxiety or feel like they don't have time for anything. And it's like, well, because you're doing what Bo talked about there, where you're swimming just to barely keep your head above water. You're not even necessarily flourishing. You don't have an opportunity to. You just have to work and work and work and work, because you keep working for a lot of these things that you maybe just aren't in line for at the moment, you know, which is okay. It's totally okay to not. It's okay to not have something at the moment. You know, it's okay. Years ago, you know, driving around crappy cars that would barely get me from point A to point B all the time, you know, and it's okay to be behind. It's okay to be a little bit stuck. It's okay to not have things figured out. But just know that you can figure them out. It just might take time. I think it's easier to make sense of a payment though, too. I think that's, you know, people are like, you know, I just pay $400 for this car or $300 for this car a month. Oh, I could afford $300 a month. But you're doing so for a very long time, and the interest rate on it and the amount of that you would actually the total amount would be, you know, far greater than the actual value of the car in the long run. And just maybe buying a $5,000 car, you know, flat out is the best thing you can do, so you don't have that damn payment, because you'll be working for that payment all the time. It is nice. It's a nice feeling to be at a stoplight and have someone kind of recognize your car and say, oh shit, that's a nice car. But maybe you're just not there yet, which again is totally okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, growing up, it was you have a house payment, so you have rent or a mortgage, and you had a car payment. That's just two things that you don't avoid. That's just what you do. And so I grew up that's all I knew. And then eventually learning like, oh wait, okay, I don't have to have either of those right now. Yeah, I do have a mortgage payment, but I'm working on the cars right now. So it's just, again, part of that education system. You know, we're that American dream. We're meant to get go to school, get a job, get debt. It sucks.
Yeah, just imagine if someone told you when you're young, just, hey, if you're ever going to get into business, try not to have a partner, try not to get a loan.
Right.
If you want further education, you should really think about if you're going to get any financial aid like that. That's a huge investment. You're trying to get into the workforce to make money, and going to college and paying financial aid is the opposite of making money. It's paying money, and you could be paying for an education system that is helpful, that is helping you. So it's just something to consider. It's just something to know, but before you get yourself in too deep.
Yeah, no, the thing you mentioned about the family system though too here is something really interesting. Like here in America, it's like, yeah, when you're 18, you go to college or you get out, you get a job. It's like, it's very spread. Whereas other cultures here, Asian cultures, African cultures, that family system of still like building familial type like wealth or whatever and working together, that's still a thing. And it's always been kind of abnormal to me when I'd hear of like my friends, like, yeah, they kicked me out, or like, yeah, they like they don't want me in the house anymore or whatever. Cause like I've mentioned this on the podcast before, when my mom gets really, really old, I want her to move back in with me. I don't ever envision myself putting her in a nursing home, because like she took care of me, then I can take care of her. And then I didn't even think of the fact that when I have a kid potentially, right, like I might not need daycare. You know what I mean? Because if she's that old, she'll be here at the family too. So I think that's something else that I'm pretty sure in America that used to be a thing. I don't know. but it's not really anymore. I don't know when maybe it stopped being a thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think maybe college is kind of the start of it. You know, the kids go off to college, and then once the kid goes to college, the kid, becomes an adult and gets a degree and gets a job. You know, like that's what my dad did, and that's what a lot of my uncles and aunts and stuff did. They got an education. They got a job right afterwards, just because like that's the way it lined up back then. It wasn't. I think now it's more complicated. There's just a lot more people in the workforce and stuff, and it's just maybe a tougher thing to figure out. But it used to just work that way. You know, you worked your way out of the house, you went to college, got yourself a job, and then probably started a family, and then that was that. But yeah, we do live very divided. I never even thought about some of the stuff that he brought up. They want you out of the house at like 18 or 20 or whatever that age is. And then, you're off to start to work towards having your own home. So there's another mortgage, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just really dividing things up a lot. I know in other countries, they still like what's yours is what's mine is yours kind of thing is a lot of times the mentality amongst family. I remember my brother was married to a woman who was a German, my brother Mike, and she didn't understand. He had trouble with his car at the time or something, and she didn't understand why he couldn't just like take mine, just like, oh, you just take your brother's car. And he's like, what? He's like, no, he needs it. And she's like, well, he can't let you have it for like a week or something. He's like, I could maybe borrow it for like to go to the grocery store or something, but he's like, no, I can't have it for like a week, Mm-hmm. But that's, they do things differently in other countries, and maybe some of those traditions are wise, especially like bringing your parents into your home. But it does get complicated. I think people don't want their lives compromised, having you have your mother in the house, but it's, it could potentially be your girlfriend's mother-in-law or something like that. Right. And then, I don't know, maybe there's conflict, or maybe there's, so it and maybe when they watch the child, they're not doing it right. They keep feeding your kid candy every time you turn around. So, But I think that those things are small costs, and I think that on a larger level, I think that the more people that you have helping to raise a child, especially when they have like-minded overall arching principles, the better off you are, and the smarter the kid's going to be. I mean, my kids, being around my mom and dad and being around their grandmother, they just learn so much from them. They don't communicate with us the same way they communicate with their grandparents. They share different interests with them. They have fun with them in different ways. They do things differently. I mean, my dad and my son, they working on Jake's car and stuff like that. Like, those are all things that he learned from my dad, learned from his grandpa, learning from an outside. Not an outside figure, but another male figure, right? And I think that the more the better. Whether it's an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a grandpa, whatever you got, I think it will all be helpful in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got another poop cast coming up in about an hour.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Quarantine doubles.
All right, take us on out of here, Andrew.
Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Thank you, Perfect Keto, for sponsoring this episode. For more information on them, check the YouTube and Facebook description, as well as the podcast show notes. Please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on TikTok and Twitter. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. And Nsima, where can people find you?
And Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter. Mark?
At Mark's Melly Bell everywhere. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch y'all later.